Thank you. Do that. Thank you all for coming. As I was getting ready in my hotel room this morning, I was thinking what an honor it is to speak on International Women's Day. And specifically because women, we learn so much from one another. And I kept thinking about the different women in my life, that I've learned from, and the women who have impacted my life. Some of you are here today. I've been in Sweden for 1.5 years, and I've had some of the most amazing conversations and had privilege to meet phenomenal women. Right? And this goes back in time, right? Since I was young, we as women, we learn so much from one another. Right? And this informs who we are in the world. For example, we have all learned strategies and tactics around being with males. Thank you for the men who came, by the way. We've all learned tactics and strategies around being with males. And this has really informed us. Right? But it's not just Homo sapiens that have done this. There's a type of female dragonfly that has developed the most extreme tactic that I think I've ever heard to get rid of unwanted suitors. So this dragonfly specifically, there she is. This is the Moreland hawker dragonfly. So what she does is when she's being pursued by a male, she crash dives into the ground. And she plays dead. And when she's ready, when the coast is clear, she gets up and wiggles her wings, or however dragonflies do that. And then she goes on about her day. Now, the majority of dragonflies, they follow this pattern. Right? So they basically, it's 8 o'clock in the morning, they fake their death to avoid having sex. But they don't put the kibosh on all male advances. When a dragonfly is ready, she'll allow a male to approach. Now, the researcher who discovered this is trying to understand whether this behavior is only in species that lay eggs, or if it's more widespread. Okay, widespread, let's go there. Let's imagine you doing this. So next time you're in a restaurant, or at the gym, or at a grocery store, and you're getting unwanted advances, and you're polite, no, not interested, or being ignored, just collapse on the floor and play dead. Yeah? And see what happens. And then, when the coast is clear, you stand up, dust, get yourself off, and go on about your day. Now, it could be worse, though, for the males, though, because the damselfly, the female damselfly, you might know this, she eats her partner. That's really rough. That's tough. Yeah, there's no comparison. Well, I don't know. I'm not going to go there. So it's amazing, right, what women have learned, how females have evolved. Right? We learn so much from one another. It's extraordinary. Reality is, for the damselfly or the dragonfly, more than likely their response is evolutionary biology. But there's a part of me that likes to think they've learned a type of emotional intelligence or a gender intelligence. The damselfly, she wasn't born plummeting to the earth. It's something that evolved as her polite tactics were being ignored. What would happen then if we, as individuals, as organizations, as nations, what would happen if we committed to increasing our emotional intelligence and our gender intelligence? So this is what I do. I speak, I coach, I consult around the world with a variety of different types of organizations on transformation, and specifically the transformation that emotional intelligence and gender intelligence can help us create. You see, when I was 24 years old, I was a United States Peace Corps volunteer in West Africa, and I was focused on helping female small business entrepreneurs grow their businesses. Because there's nothing like having a female who has her own money, right? And then fast forward, I'm now 29 years old. I take a leadership position at a startup company. I work with a male CEO, male CFO, male founder. And I primarily work alone with the male CFO. We work in a room probably about this size right here. So 2 weeks into my job, I'm coming, I'm 29, I'm excited, I sit down at my desk, turn on my computer, and what's there? oh, pornography. Yeah, on my screen. So I'm like, oh, my first response was like, oh God, what did I do wrong? What did I download? Oh. So I click delete, and it goes away. A week later, I come in, good morning, CFO, sit down at my computer, turn it on, and yeah, porn's back. This time, like, I don't think I did anything, but okay. A week later, I come in, you know what happens, porn's there. This time, I talk to the founder of the company, and to his credit, he immediately does some investigating. And what he finds is that the CFO has a library of porn on his computer. But why was he choosing to look at his porn on my computer? I had a really small screen and an uncomfortable chair and, like. So the founder of the company says, that's it, he's going to be fired. The next day, he's not fired because he apologized and the CEO really didn't want to let him go. Okay, so I have a choice to make. Do I work alone with someone who's been downloading porn on my computer? Now, these choices are so personal, right? I mean, I could respond like the dragonfly, or I could respond like the damselfly, which may have put me in prison. Or I can make a different choice. So I called my parents, got their advice. My father, whose vision of me was to be the CEO of New York Stock Exchange, he said, Laurie, these things happen. Put your head down and stay. I did not, again, listen to my father's advice, and I left. So here's the 2 points, right, of why I'm telling you this story. Is what happened, whether it's pornography or harassment or something else, continues in 2020 to happen to the majority of women around the world. And may have happened to the majority of women in this room. The second reason I'm telling you that is because that company that I worked for, that company, it no longer exists. It didn't survive. Because in this era of globalization and technology, everything is being brought to the light. So in traditionally oppressive societies to progressive societies, the light is being shown on all of it. And these current systems of patriarchy, as we know them, are starting to crumble. And we have a choice to replace it with something else. Every day, we have a choice to replace it with something else. Now, this crumbling, right, this shift, is causing certain people to also be scared and angry. And at the same time, women around the world are facing certain challenges. Some are lacking confidence. Right? Others are having this imposter syndrome, right? Imposter syndrome, you get to a certain level and you feel like, oh God, I don't belong. I'm not sure if I should be here. Others are chasing this crazy, crazy level of perfection. I mean, how many injections do we need to have in our body to look fine and feel like we're perfect? And others aren't asking for what they need. So the reason I do the work that I do is I want to make the world a more connected place. I want to see a world where women are equally represented in every aspect of society. Now, as you and as women and men here today, I know that you're committed to improving the lives of women and girls around the world. I believe that we'll do this by increasing our emotional intelligence and by increasing our gender intelligence, and by all of us continuing to speak up, stand up, and rise up. Okay, you have, hopefully, paper, little Post-its on your chair. It's question time. It's question time. Okay. 3 questions for you. The first is, who do you think is a great leader in your life? Someone who encouraged you to be the person you are today. Who do you think is a great leader? And it's someone who encouraged you to be the person you are today. If you could write that down on one of the Post-its. When you're done, can you raise a hand? Okay, wait a couple more seconds. Second question, how did this person make you feel? How did this person make you feel? Okay, for example, I'm thinking about my cross-country coach when I was in high school. I was 14 years old. I was a couch potato American kid. And for some strange reason, I decided to go out for cross-country in high school. So my coach, he stayed with me up until the very end, meaning you run a 10K. It took me 3 months to be able to finish a 10K. So he had all these other elite high school runners that he was coaching. But he would stay when there was no one else at the finish line, literally, there was no one else at the finish line, he stayed there. And he always told me what a great job I was doing. He always encouraged me. He never belittled me or made me feel like I was less than one of these elite runners. He's probably the reason that I still run today. That could have been a very, very different experience. And he made me feel like I was valued. He made me feel like I mattered. So, how did this person make you feel? I move around a lot, don't I?
Yeah, it's okay. I think I put it hard enough.
It's a good thing I don't start dancing. All right, and lastly, what attributes did they have? What attributes? Meaning, so my coach, right? He was empathetic. He was compassionate. He was a silent, confident man. So what attributes did this person have? And I'd like to hear, if possible, from one or two people. There's no pressure, but if anybody would like to share, that would be appreciated. We have a hand in the front row. Maria.
Hey.
Who was the person?
I was going to write Nelson Mandela.
Oh.
Thank you. I was going to write Nelson Mandela, but I didn't interact with him personally. So I wrote Byron Kathleen Katie, and yes, that's the person.
And how did they make you feel?
She literally gave me the tools to blow up my mind, so I found a different identity within me that I didn't know it existed at all. And I did it by myself with her tool. Yeah.
And what attributes did she have? How would you describe her?
That she has total unconditional love in a way I had never experienced in my life. She is truthful, and I wrote 3 things. Let me see the other one I wrote. Oh, she offers very simple directions without pushing you or trying to manipulate you. She just presents it's an invitation. She's open-hearted, I would say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I wanted to share my great leader, and this is my mother, definitely. Okay. I believe that I am the woman that I am today because of her, and she made me feel that anything was possible. You, with three special attributes. One is passion, because if you don't have the heart for that, then don't do it. You have to be really by the cause. And she's a doctor, a public manager of a hospital. So, you have to give your heart, your soul into it to change things. The second, she's a change rebel. She was not happy with any situation that she was in. So she tried to change the status quo of that. And that makes her, of course, stubborn and hard worker, because you have to really believe that the change is possible to make things happen. So, and she make the future believe it. So I think that driven, hardworking, and change maker will be the three attributes.
Thank you. So, these different attributes that we heard about, right? We heard about visionaries, we heard about open-hearted, we heard about being compassionate, right? So all of these are traits of someone who has high emotional intelligence, right? So emotional intelligence meaning, right, they have access to their emotions, like an access I'm going to point to in here, right, because it's something that we feel. They have access to their emotions, and then they take action on that with the goal of creating overall well-being for themselves and for others. So how emotional intelligence works is, if you can imagine, we'll imagine two areas of our brain. We'll imagine the limbic system or the emotional system, and we imagine the rational system. Let's talk about emotional first, and then the emotional brain. So this is the area that evolved first. It's where we have our amygdala. It's where we store hunches, or we have hunches and intuition, because a lot of information is stored here. It's where we have our fight and flight response. Okay, over here, we have our rational brain, evolved later on. It's much more complex. It's where we do planning and decision-making, okay? And the idea is in emotional intelligence, can these two work closely together? Because, okay, let's talk about an example. So let's imagine that you come into the place where you work one morning. And you say good morning, you say hello to people, and someone that you really respect and you like, they turn their back to you. Okay? That stimulus happens. It comes in through the spinal cord, and if our emotional brain might say something like, oh God, what did I do wrong? Okay? If we pause a few seconds, our rational brain might say something like, oh, I wonder what's going on for them. Our rational brain might be more curious about the situation. So we would respond differently in both situations, right? If I was listening to my emotional brain, good morning, someone ignores me, I might be like, oh, what did I do wrong? I'm just going to go into my office, right? If that happens and I get in touch with my rational brain and let the two parts inform, I might be curious about it, right? I might respond differently. I might go check in on them. Who knows? So, and what I love about emotional intelligence is that this can be learned, right? We're not born with a fixed set of emotional intelligence for the rest of our lives. That wasn't the case. That's not what we believed, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Now, when we talk about emotional intelligence and when you hear about emotional intelligence, you'll hear about compassion and empathy. And so here, but all emotional intelligence, it generally follows or discusses 5 specific competencies, okay? So on the upper left, we have self-perception. So self-perception meaning, am I confident, right? How do I see myself? What is my self-regard? Moving to the left, we have self-expression. So how do I express myself? Do I express myself? How assertive am I? We have our interpersonal, right? Our interpersonal relationships. So how am I with other people? How is my social responsibility in the world? Empathy and compassion would also fall under this. We have decision making. How do I make decisions? Do I make decisions? Do I look at the facts and the stories before I make decisions? And then we have stress management. How do I manage stress? And what I love about emotional intelligence, aside from it can be learned, it can be used in different types of settings. For example, when I was in the US, before I left, I was working with young women who were in phase 1 of recovery. So they were phase 1 of drug and alcohol addiction. To the other extreme, where Google and Harvard track their employees' emotional intelligence. Right? And they do this because people with high emotional intelligence, they tend to be this term high performers. High performing meaning they have this overall sense of well-being. You know, they develop strategies in their life for helping them achieve goals and also helping them manage stress. You know, I view emotional intelligence as, you know, kind of building this leader within. Right? It's about building this internal leader. Now, let's talk then about gender and emotional intelligence. Okay, first let's distinguish between gender being the social construct, and gender and sex. Sex being the X and Y chromosomes that we're born with. Or, you know, as I say, I have a 16-and-a-half-year-old daughter, and I say to her almost every night, Mika, gender is a construct. Society is a construct. Money is a construct. But 8 o'clock bedtime, kiddo, is very, very real. So it might surprise you, but from an emotional intelligence and gender perspective, there's two bodies of research out there, and in summary, here's what they say. Number 1, women score higher than men on emotional intelligence globally around the world. Secondly, women and men score about the same on emotional intelligence around the world. So again, this is a global study. Anything that I'm about to say, I realize that I'm in Sweden, the country that's number 4 in the world in gender equality. So this may not apply to anybody in this room, okay? Global thinking, global perspective. So where women and men differ, where males and females differ, is in specific competencies. So for example, women tend to score higher around empathy, compassion, self-awareness. We tend to score lower, though, in decision-making and assertiveness. Okay? And what I love about emotional intelligence is that it breaks down, these gender barriers. Because as we know now, there's no male brain. We're not born with a male brain and a female brain. Our gender intelligence, like our emotional intelligence, is very much a social construct in a sense and can be learned at any time. Okay, so for example, we know that females, broadly speaking, I almost feel like we put Sweden here and then the rest of the world on a map. But broadly speaking, women in patriarchal societies were less competitive than males. But that result actually reverses in certain matrilineal societies, where females are actually more competitive than the males. So this debunks any myth that our gender intelligence is based on some sort of X or Y chromosome, right? This is very much a social construct, and we can develop this at any time. Okay, now let's talk about emotional intelligence and the state of the world. Now, there's a State of the Heart report that was published in 2018, and what it shared was that emotional intelligence globally has been on the decline since 2011. And what happens when emotional intelligence declines is that we see rising levels of stress and decreased emotional control. Now, we have come a long way in achieving gender equality. We've made great strides over the last couple of thousand years. Let's take a long-term view here. I believe that there's four challenges specifically I want to talk about today in us achieving gender equality. The first is the rise of the far right. The first is the rise of right-wing extremist groups. Okay? And while Donald Trump's in the election in the United States, I believe, allowed for bad behavior to be more tolerated around the world, I believe that this was only part of a tipping point, because this right-wing movement has been simmering in a number of countries for decades. Right? And Sweden, as you know, has a Swedish Democratic Party, right, with historical ties to the Nazis. And if there was an election today, that would be the largest political party. So Sweden, on one hand, from a global perspective, Sweden is really the vision for what a country can accomplish for gender. And at the same time, Sweden may be 1 or 2 election cycles from having these public policies that support or promote gender equality challenged or taken away. And it's not just Sweden. From South Africa to Brazil to the United States to other countries in Europe, the right-wing movement is on the rise. They're gaining more membership. And the key thing is that they do not promote females having choice. They don't promote females having choice. Okay. The second challenge to us achieving gender equality, I would say, is globalization and technology. And I'm putting these together. We could talk for days about globalization and technology. But here's the thing, and we could talk for days about it because we see this from the micro perspective to the macro perspective. From the micro perspective to what are our preteens exposed to on YouTube and Snapchat and all these other social media outlets, whether it's porn or bullying, right? That's the macro, what parents, teachers, uncles, what are we thinking about every day for our young people? To the other extreme, right, so from the macro perspective, where Google and YouTube were recently both are being sued, or they were recently sued, for collecting data on children under the age of 13. That's illegal. You can't do it. So who is leading this fourth industrial revolution called technology? Females need to be more in this space. I'm thrilled to say that the Women in Tech conference is happening, I think, now, also in Stockholm. It's sold out in 3 minutes. Clearly, there is a demand for us. The fourth challenge to us achieving gender equality is patriarchy. I want to give you a slightly different view on patriarchy, though. The first act of violence that patriarchy demands of males is not violence towards women. Instead, patriarchy demands of all males that they engage in acts of psychic self-mutilation, that they kill off the emotional parts of themselves. If an individual is not successful in emotionally crippling himself, he can count on patriarchal men to enact rituals of power that will assault his self-esteem. So this can no longer be an us against them. Right? Male engagement is key. Because systems in the natural world that fight against each other, they perish. And most importantly, when our emotional intelligence is low, when our gender intelligence is low, not only are we not contributing to the solution, but we become part of the problem. So we talked about emotional intelligence, we talked about gender intelligence, right? There's tools that we can use. And with all the work that I've done with women, whether it's executives in Manhattan or young adolescents in India whose families earn less than $2 a day, I've realized that there's this key attributes of what I called, talking about building this leader within. So I feel like leadership, right? It all begins with curiosity. As individuals, we need to think about the things that are important to us. We have to become curious about finding some of the answers to solving the challenges that we face every day. But from there, what happens is that we move to this place of conviction. Conviction meaning, right? I know who I am, and this is what I take a stand for. And once we have that conviction, it gives us the courage we need to step out into the world and become a better version of ourselves. but we also encourage others to do the same. And it's at this point, I believe, that we connect. You know, we connect at such a deep level, whether it's connecting with our friends, our families, our employers and our teams, or connecting with ourselves. You know, and then we weave this all together. I want to go back and I want to talk about curiosity. I want to spend time in curiosity. Curiosity is when we pause. Curiosity is when we distinguish facts and stories. It's when we think about the things that really matter to us. Like, what really matters to me? Around facts and stories, right? It's when we think about those stories, and specifically stories meaning those things that I make up. Because stories, well talked about, that we need to have powerful stories, and stories can be very powerful and motivating, but they can also be very debilitating if we live into them like they're true. Specifically, those stories that disempower us, or the ones that disconnect us from other human beings. Let's get curious. Ready? Let's get curious around gender. Okay? Gender means social construct, not gender, the X and Y chromosome. Okay. Question, you don't need to write this one down. Consider, what did you learn about gender, and when did you learn it? What did you learn about gender, and when did you learn it? So I'm talking about childhood first memories. Okay, for example, I am 7 years old. I grew up in the countryside of Pennsylvania in the United States. It was a very exciting time with the trees. So I'm at the breakfast table. My mom leaves this book at the breakfast table. She goes away, and I'm sitting here looking at this book. It's a children's book about male and female anatomy and basically, you know, sex, how babies are born. So I take this book, and I'm flipping through it, and I come to this page of females, women with breasts. So there's like 8 women in this row. There's women with big breasts and large breasts, small breasts, high breasts, low breasts. And at 7, I was like, okay, I'm ordering those, right? Like I'm ordering from Ika Maxi or Amazon, right? You know, and then I fast forward, I'm 12 years old, and I look down, I'm like, this is not what I had ordered when I was 7. You know, who did not get my order? Because no one ever told me that my body was perfect. No one ever said that. And I still don't think to this day that we tell our young women enough, our young girls enough, your body's perfect, go be courageous, go do amazing things in the world. We've come a long way since the 80s, 1980s. We still have a long way to go. The second story I want to share is there was a young man, and when he was asked this question, he shared that when he was 8 years old, his older sister started menstruating. And when women start menstruating in Nepal, they're no longer allowed to eat at the dining table with the family because they're considered unclean. So when he was 8 years old, he learned that he had power, or as I say, gender power over females. So for you to consider, when did you first learn about gender, and what did you learn? And is that a story that you still live into? Do you believe that? All right, now, once we sit in our curiosity, and we're thinking about what really matters to me, what are the facts and stories, we come to this place of conviction. It automatically happens. You feel it. We feel it. And conviction is about making a declaration, right? I declare this is how the world is going to go. I declare this for women. I declare this for myself. And for this International Women's Day, I would like you to consider, what are you a declaration for? What are you a declaration for? What are you standing for? We're sitting in our conviction, and then we need some courage. This is the part globally where women tend to be challenged. Again, this whole room could be excluded from that. But this is, broadly speaking, this is where women tend to be challenged. So we need some courage. And courage, the way I think about it, is really about like stepping out. You take a first step. And once we take that first step and we repeat it over and over and over again, we begin to build our confidence. But the first step is always about courage. So the author Elizabeth Gilbert has this story about courage. She says that when she was younger and she would embark on a new project, right? When you start a new project, we feel like excitement and joy and like woohoo, like whoa, so much enthusiasm, and then fear would show up. And when she was younger, she thought there was something wrong with that. Like, oh, maybe I shouldn't do this. There's a warning sign, the universe is telling me, blah, 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 blah. Right? So now what she does is she imagines that she's driving a car. So she's driving this car, and her project is next to her with excitement and joy and enthusiasm. So she's driving this car, and then fear shows up. So now what she does is she looks at fear directly, and she says, yep, I knew you showed up, you always do. But fear, you do not get to drive. You have to sit in the back seat. Because fear never, ever gets to drive. So we have our courage, we're beginning to step out into the world, and this is where we need to start connecting with others. And as females, we do this inherently well. Emotional intelligence around the world says that we are compassionate and we are empathetic. I want to talk about a different type of compassion, though. I want to talk about something called fierce compassion. Fierce compassion, smiles, laughter. Fierce compassion is when we take a stand for something, we muster up all of our courage, and we are stepping out into the world, and we're connecting with ourselves, and we are vessels for something greater than ourselves. In the world, we see a lot of fierceness, but we don't necessarily see it with a lot of compassion. So let's talk about two examples of fierce compassion. So the first is the women's suffrage movement. I move around a lot. The women's suffrage movement. So for a long, long time, we have wanted to have our voices heard. We've wanted to have a voice in the world. Our voices matter. We have something to say. And within 100 years, women globally achieved the right to vote. We accomplished this. Okay, better? All right, so within 100 years, we accomplished this. We achieved the right to vote. Right, we had New Zealand kicking this off in 1893, Europe, the United States, in the 1920s, 1930s, Africa, 1950s and 60s, and finally Saudi Arabia in 2015. Okay. So on one hand, we could say, but Laurie, it was 100 years. That's a really long time. But think about how long we had wanted to have our voices heard. How long did we want to vote? Because we stood in our fierce compassion, we were able to accomplish this globally, thanks to globalization and technology at that time. The second example I want to give is Greta Tunberg, and I hope I'm pronouncing her name properly, Greta Tunberg. So here is a young woman who 2.5 years ago, the world did not know who she was. Right? Maybe Sweden did. The world did not know who she was. But thanks to globalization and thanks to technology, she has now put on the global agenda climate change and the environment because this young woman stood in her fierce compassion. And people saw this mattered, this is about more than us, this is for the environment, we care about this. She has millions of people now following her. So 2 examples of fierce compassion. This movement is not static. We have a lot of work to do together. And on today specifically, we come together to acknowledge women and girls around the world. We come together to acknowledge the men and women who have come before us, who have stood in their fierce compassion and their conviction that have allowed us to have the freedoms we have today. It is a great privilege. And I want to say some of these people are in this room. Thank you. So with that in mind, there's 3 things I invite you to do starting today, right? So number 1, when I ask you that question about who do you believe is a leader in your life, someone who encouraged you to be the person you are today, I want you to take that information, what you wrote down, and I want you to go share it with them, if you still have access to them. Because we need to be sharing with people who matter to us and let them know the impact they have on our lives. The second thing that I want you to do, we talked about conviction, and we talked about making a declaration for International Women's Day. I'd like you to write down on a Post-it, what are you declaring for International Women's Day in 2020? This could be for an individual. It could be a friend, your mother, a daughter. It could be for yourself. It could be for a cause, Plan International, the Case for Her, or it could be an overall feeling. Right? You might feel like, I just need to take up more space in 2020. I want to be more courageous in 2020. So write down on that Post-it your conviction, your declaration for 2020. And as you're leaving, there's that glass door right there that's closed. Please paste it on there. Please, please, please. And lastly, thirdly, I'd like to leave you with a quote and then a lovely video. So, Dr. Martin Luther King said, "Freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed." And lastly, this is, where's my video? I was going to do a video by the movie, in the movie The Greatest Showman. So I'm going to talk to this because I don't know what happened to this. Maybe the gremlins got into my computer last night. So in this video, Kayla Settle, who was the woman with the beard in this movie, they are rehearsing the "This Is Me" song. And in the "This Is Me" song, right, the movie has not been greenlit, they don't have funding, and she needs to step out from behind the musical stand. But she hasn't been doing this in any of the rehearsals. So in this clip, I really want to show this to you. Can you bear with me for one moment? Can you just talk amongst yourself? I really want to show you this. I'm sorry, you can't leave without seeing this. So in this clip, Kayla Settle hasn't come out from behind the musical stand. I'm just repeating myself. The movie has not been greenlit, and now is the last rehearsal. She needs to come out from behind the stand, right? So I wanted you to watch and see what happens. Can you turn it up?
Hide away, they say, 'cause we don't want your broken parts.
You know, when the sharpest words want to cut me down, I'm going to send the flood, I'm going to drown them out. I am brave, I am bruised, I am who I'm meant to be, this is me. At this moment, we are being asked to create something new. There are no boundaries. There is no organizational structure. We are all being asked to lead, and we are all going to be asked to follow as well. So at this moment, we have a choice, right? We can create something new. We can respond like the dragonfly, or we can respond like the damselfly. Or we can make a different choice. So my final question for you is, who are you going to choose to be today? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.